Oh, there we go. Perfect. Okay. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome, everybody, to the Saturday Morning Mastermind. I'm your host, Samantha Studebaker-Carl, and I'm here with my friends Chris and Christina, Dan, Jason, Sandy, Karen, and Marjorie this morning. And we are going to be talking about how to, what did I say the title was? How to become immune to evil, I think was what our topic is for today. And the reason we're talking about that is because we're discussing verse 60 of the Tao Te Ching as interpreted by Wayne Dyer in his book, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao. But before we get started, I'm going to give everybody an opportunity to introduce themselves. And then also, just to let you guys know, if you're watching this as a recording, we have a new Facebook group. So you can find us, Mindset Mastery Collective, in Facebook. And there'll be a link below this video on YouTube, so you can easily click over and jump in our group. And then you can participate in our conversation too. So who wants to be the first person to introduce themselves? Go ahead and unmute yourself and jump out there. Tell us who you are and where you're from.
I think I'm right next to you on the screen, so I'll go. Hi, everybody. My name is Christina Irvin. I live in Northeast Tennessee, and it's good to be here with everybody today.
I'm Karen Lohoff. I live in Chandler, Arizona, and it's good to be here with you, and it's so good to see so many of us here. Love it.
Dan Sisek in Las Vegas, Nevada, and again, yeah, I'm loving seeing everybody here, and glad to see Christina back again. Love having her here, and we've missed you.
Welcome, Christina. Go ahead.
I'm Marjorie, and I'm from Greenbelt, Maryland, and I am so glad to be here.
Glad you made it, Marjorie. This is Chris from Chicago, and I'm glad we have a nice sized group today. Welcome, everyone.
Good morning, Sandy Root here in sunny Miami Beach. And yeah, good to see you again, Christina. Been a long time.
Awesome, guys. Can we hear you yet, Jason?
Hey, yeah.
There you go.
Hey, great to hear everybody. Great to see you guys. Hi, Sandy. Hey, Christina. How you doing? Good to see you. So glad to make it on this morning. I hope everybody's having a great morning. It's beautiful down here in Florida, as I'm sure Sandy just told everybody. But I'm looking forward to learning some more great principles on how we can get in alignment with the Tao. How about you guys? Right. So what's going on, Samantha?
Awesome. So glad to have you all here this morning. It's wonderful seeing so many of your beautiful faces and hearing those voices from those of you who we can't see. And Dan, you already jumped out, right? Did you jump out? I thought I heard it.
I did. I snuck in there.
Okay, gotcha. We got more people, so I'm like, I want to make sure everybody has their opportunity to jump out. Okay, so we're talking about verse 60 of the Tao Te Ching. Who would like to read the verse this week?
Hey, I could read it.
Okay.
Tao Te Ching, verse 60. Governing a large country is like frying a small fish. Boy, you gotta help me understand that. You spoil it with too much poking. Approach the universe with Tao, and evil will have no power. Not that evil is not powerful, but its power will not be used to harm others. Not only will it not do harm to others, but the sage himself will also be protected. If only the ruler and his people would refrain from harming each other, all the benefits of life would accumulate in the kingdom.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, that first part cracked me up when I first read it too. Governing a small country is like frying a small fish. You poke it, or you spoil it by poking it too much. So yeah, I thought that was pretty funny. I'm like, well, that's true though, isn't it? Anytime there's somebody who thinks they're the authority figure, and they're trying to tell everybody else what to do, and they keep telling them, then yeah, what happens? Everybody rebels, right? So I think that's what that's trying to say. But I like how he talked about it being like a fish, frying a fish. So what was everybody else's first thoughts when you read this verse?
I'll jump out. Oh, go ahead. Whoever else was jumping out.
That was just you, I think.
Oh, okay. I heard some weird background noise, I guess. I was going to say, I think that's pretty, in some ways, kind of self-explanatory a little bit, because if you look at it, even our own government, our own systems here in the United States, how our government kind of prods and pokes and, into our lives, and we poke, back and things like that. I think it's, uh, to me, it's a pretty good picture of what we have going on constantly within our own, stuff here, that when things get too far one side, we, us being the people have the voice and the choice to change things, kind of bring it back in line with where they're supposed to be. So I think, it just kind of shows itself in that there's an ebb and a balance and a flow to how that works.
Well, you know me, every time I read it out, I'm thinking, what the hell is this saying? So, and that's the true form again today. But you bring in a good point about the government, Dan. And so are you saying that it's saying that that it's a natural balancing, and that the government goes too far and then we come back to try to balance it out as the people? Is that what you're saying?
I think that's what that's what the intentions and stuff are set up to be, and the way it should be. And I think that's how, but then there are times where you have people who come in and take their stuff to extremes, kind of like if you look in past history, the dictators of the world, or those, in the, like, that kind of go to the extreme and use their power for a lot of harm. And if you do anything against, you don't have a real opportunity for real change, unless you really truly revolt or uprise or enforce those changes through other means. And so, but I think that's also kind of for us in our everyday lives too, because we can accept something and allow things to go on in our own lives that will just kind of whatever, and then, but when we get to our point where we've had it, then we tend to revolt and change and go against that, to kind of get ourselves back hopefully in a natural sense of balance for ourselves, where we're at too.
So yeah, I see what you're saying. I think for me, my original thought after what in the heck does the fish have to do with this is it's more or less going back to the lesson of if we all were approaching life with more compassion for ourselves and for others, then everything would be so much better. And for me personally, like even sticking with your example, Dan, I don't think that our political discourse would be so horrible if I weren't saying, well, this affects me so much, and I could care less about what you think about something else affecting you, because this affects me, and all I care about is me. And lobbyists, all they care about is their interest or whatever. So I think the lack of compassion it takes not only the balance out, but it adds the venom to life.
That's true. Those are wise words. I was a little bit shaking my head at the beginning, thinking, oh, Trump would like this first sentence too much. Governing a large country is like frying a small fish. I thought, I don't like that.
It's interesting, this verse, because I've sort of been thinking about this in a way with what's going on in the world and in our country lately. How, as I want to help and be able to help where I can and be an activist and all of that, but I'm also I think sometimes when we're in that resistance, we're sort of making the power stronger because there's that resistance, and it makes that evil more powerful in a way, if we're doing it from resistance. So, really doing it from a centered place out of harmony without this, like, I have to resist this evil force, or, coming from, I guess it's where you're coming from with it, how it's going to impact. Because if you're resisting it, it's almost sort of, you're fighting it in an evil way, in a way, I guess. I don't know if I'm explaining that right. But in the first paragraph that Wayne says, about, if you have an inner awareness that evil can't impact you, if you're centered within the protective net of the Tao. And that was something I was thinking about too, like, who knows what could happen in our country now. And, so I think of those things like, what, if something like this would happen, or then, how would I be impacted, or this, looking at things that are happening, how does this impact me or my family or friends and loved ones? But then it's like with the law of attraction, like, you notice when you're in the flow of a good vibration, these things they don't affect you. Even if they're out there, they're affecting people. But if you're in that vibe of your high vibe vortex, like, those things just don't hit you. Like, you just escape them somehow, like you're in the right place at the right time, and that kind of thing. And so I noticed that in my day too, like, just without evil, but, just if I'm, in a high vibe place, then magic is occurring all around me. But if I have maybe one negative or thought or something, maybe somebody cuts me off, and then I'm like more angry, like, ah, and then it triggers more of that reaction coming from the outside world. So it's like that what's within is without, and you get impacted by how you're being. And on that, there was another part. Maybe I'll bring that up later. I have to find it again. That's it for now.
I think that's a great point, Sandy, about the difference between a resisting and allowing, and the place that you're actually acting from. And one of the things that kind of popped up for me when reading this chapter was that kind of reminder of, like when you're kids and your little brother, he keeps messing with you, and every time he messes with you, you're like, I'm going to murder you, and then you end up in this big old fight. But yet, what does your parents tell you? They say, well, just ignore him and he'll stop. And it's like, okay, well, if you quit being the one that is reacting, then the person who's trying to fight with you can't fight with you. So they lose interest and go and do something else, right? And where, if you're talking about, like, in the world in general, if we get upset about something and then we're out there trying to aggressively go back at it, then we're just as much of the problem as whatever it is that's going on. Because, like, Christina was saying, is that you've got one person who is all about themselves and you're all about yourself, and then nobody's getting anything done because you're not in cooperation, you're in competition. And so this person is seeing you as quote unquote evil, and you're seeing them as quote unquote evil, and it doesn't fix anything. Whereas, Sandy, when you're talking about it depends on where you're coming from. If we're sitting here in a space within ourselves where we're centered in the Tao, and we are peace within ourselves, and we know that, yes, we'd like to see these changes in the world, but going out there and trying to force other people to do things isn't really the answer. The answer is more to live from the place that we know is right, and then just allow this crap to be whatever it is, and we do and live our lives as the example, per se, of what we want everything to be. And then we start to see that in our lives because that's what we're focused on. And the more that we do it, the more other people do it, the more that more people in the world start to do it, then that's how our world changes. And I think it's interesting because if we look back on history and we see a lot of this, it's like, just even 100 years ago, when everything was being used in an unpleasant way, and there was no environmental friendliness, and there was none of that, and there was no nobody was concerned about organic food or healthy or this or that and the other. And now we're in a different era where those things are, that we are seeing those changes. Now, we still have all these issues in the world. There's a lot of things that are still a problem, but we are seeing changes towards, I think, towards the better. That's okay. That's all for now. I saw a couple of you thinking about coming out. Jump out.
Well, I was going to jump out, and something that came to mind between what you and Sandy have said. A good example that comes to mind of like Gandhi, how he changed where he lived through the power of using, you know, peaceful ways and peaceful means, but yet he changed the whole country through the movement of where he, you know, I don't think they really fought per se in a sense, but he brought about change by the way people thought and used that, and it kind of just grew and grew and grew to where everybody kind of caught into the feeling and what was going on. And we've seen other times where, you know, through the peaceful acts of doing something rather than responding or replying or retaliating, it affected people's thoughts, and they looked at it and said, oh yeah, we get what they're wanting to change or what they're wanting to do. We see it, we get it. And then they joined in rather than when somebody was fighting back or this side, because then, like you said, everybody rears their ugly head and kind of, you know, just comes back. And I love your analogy of the two siblings. You know, that's the perfect analogy. You know, we'll just ignore them and just move on. And, you know, we've all heard that. We've all said, I've said it to my nieces and nephews, you know, and thinking, you know, okay, fine, you know, but do we all really listen to that? And do we all really make that a point in our lives when we get to that point, so we can center ourselves back into, as Sandy said, that high vibrational state and that more, you know, calm state and that high energy state?
I think I'm getting a little lost with the analogy, or probably I'm thinking too far into it. Knowing me, that's probably likely. So, but I think for me, I think ignoring brings indifference, and indifference keeps perpetuating the venom one way or the other, in my opinion. But I think but I will admit that I'm thinking about this whole discussion in the prism of what's going on in our world and our country today. So, you know, if I think about ignoring things, then I would say, well, that's why nobody had a problem with the Indians, the Native Americans being put on reservations and them still not getting rights. And that's why nobody had a problem with segregation and slavery for so many years. That's why we didn't have any problems with women not having equality for so many years. I mean, I don't know that I'm having a hard time getting to the point of ignoring, or I'm having a hard time with that one. Somebody's going to help me out.
All right, I got something to say. That is actually like a really good point. That's where it like matters, like thinking about stuff and caring about stuff. That is really important, what you're saying, Christina. I think what Samantha was pointing to was like small family quabbles where kids will get in a little fight or something. And I'm just going to say it, even though I'm not a parent, it also applies to parents with their kids and kids with their parents. You know, like not getting too involved over small stuff. But as far as caring for the world, that does matter. And I think you're entirely right about that. And you are thinking about it too much.
Well, I don't think it's about ignoring it. I don't think that's what the Tao is trying to teach us at all. I think that what it's trying to teach us is to, like what Sandy was saying, it's all in how you are, where you're coming from. It's like if you're coming from this attitude of just trying to squash the other person in whatever it is. You know, I know we have these issues that what you were talking about in history with, you know, equal rights and slavery and oppression and all of those kinds of things. But I think that like, okay, so here's a good example. And this is another one of those things that, is the hot topic, is that, we've got these, we've got pro-lifers, and then we have the people that are pro-choice, right? And so if these groups come in conflict with each other and they're fighting with each other, you hear about these stories where there's these pro-life people that are sitting outside the abortion clinics and they're being violent towards the pro-choice people, right? And it's like they're not fixing the problem. They're not trying to influence them. They're just trying to force them to stop by doing violence to them. And it makes absolutely no sense. Like it's like you don't solve violence with violence, right? You solve things by educating. You solve things by compassion. You come from a place of, this is who I am, this is what I'm about, and this is how I see the world. And so I move within the world and do the things that I think is right for me. And I don't freak out when somebody over here is doing their thing. I just make sure that what I'm doing is working towards the greater good. And you can do that by being an activist and by taking actions and working towards changing the laws and all of those things without trying to murder and destroy the people on the other side. You know what I'm saying? So
no, absolutely. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was thinking. And you articulated exactly what I was thinking, because I was trying to figure out how to say it in the context, but you did it perfectly. I think that's why, I tell people all the time that, because people are like, you are always having these conversations where like, I don't care if it's about racism, sexism, people, pro-choice, transgender bathrooms, like it doesn't matter what it is, you're capable, you like have the communication with people on the extremes, and it doesn't have the venom. And I think it's because, like you were saying, I'm not coming from a place of I'm right, you're wrong, but I'm coming from a place of compassion. So, so I can say, I get what you're saying about, pro-life and the sanctity of life, but can we discuss the sanctity of the entire life? Or can we discuss the fact that there's a single woman with 4 children who has no, support system, and already they're homeless, and what another child who has healthcare issues? Can we just discuss these broad parameters here? And I think it's because I'm able to come at it with more compassion rather than trying to prove someone right or wrong, and being willing to be open to another side of things.
That's really good, Christina.
Yeah, it's about being open, I think, in communication, and not letting our emotions cloud things so much that we can't discuss the different points of views, so we can, come together and really help out the individuals when it comes down to it that need the help or need the support. There was a verse, was it? Talking about leadership. Who's talking about? They mentioned, to become a leader, you need to first follow, and then be an example. And that's, I think, kind of a part of it. You be an example, and your consistency, and just being there, being present, and sort of taking a stand, but not resisting complete all the communication is part of it. But it does take that balance that you guys were talking about. Wow, I mean, yeah, not a really easy thing. None of those hot topics are easy to discuss, but this is great stuff. I just remember earlier in like one of these verses where they mentioned, well, just about being a better leader is to first of all know how to be a follower as well. So I don't know. I can't find the verse right now. So.
But you have a point that Jason, like, that made me think of too, like somebody said something about responding. I can't remember exactly what was said, but I remember thinking that I think that the key is to respond, because when you respond rather than react, you kind of are not coming out of emotion, but you're being a little bit more thoughtful and balanced about how you respond. I think, at least for me, anyway. But being willing to be the example. Going back to what you were saying, Samantha, which is that was what Gandhi was all about. I want to be the example in the world that I wish to see, right? So with the long-going example that we've had, I had to actually take a step back right after the elections, and I was like, okay, here's the thing. This man and his administration makes my blood boil, and many of the things that I'm reading from his supporters make my blood boil. That said, many of the things that I'm reading from the other side supporters makes my blood boil. And I had to really kind of sit back and think about how I respond to things. And if I can respond with reason, and appealing to someone else's just common sense versus appealing to like out of anger or whatever, that's helped my conversations. But it's also helped me see the hypocrisy in myself. And I've been willing to see that hypocrisy in myself. So now I can be like, all right, Christina, like you're tripping on that. But for real, let's talk about what you were thinking just 5 minutes ago, right? I don't know that we're willing to look ourselves in the mirror and be honest with ourselves. And so as I think about this verse, that's kind of really playing strong in my mind. What do you guys think?
I think sometimes you also have to understand where the argument is coming from across the aisle, so to speak. I mean, what their intentions are. Sometimes they're just trying to get us riled up. Sometimes, they're trying to play both sides of the fence. And, if we can recognize when people are basically trying to manipulate our emotions so that we can't have a conversation, and then they say, oh, well, look, see, they can't even handle it, so there's no talking to them. I mean, there are people out there that use those tactics because sometimes they don't have any ground to stand on. So we've got to also just remember not to fall victim to those traps. So staying grounded and balanced, and that higher vibe that Sandy was mentioning is, I think, very helpful.
I forget who was sort of going along these lines. Maybe it was you, Jason, but there's this part that Wayne says, when negativity feels like it's directed right at you, retreat to that place of kindness and love within and deflect that energy. And I think I shared these stories on a past hangout, but I'm going to share them again because I think they're really good and go with this conversation. From this audio I was listening to, this guy was talking about, he was driving, and I think he sort of cut somebody off by accident, and the guy got really mad and so he just like put his hand up and kept driving, but then the guy like forced him off the road because he wanted to find him. So the guy who, was calm, like, okay, I'll pull over and see what this guy wants and, try to deflect the energy, I guess. So, or he was mad too. At first he's like, so he's going to go, okay, let's find him with this guy. But then he saw that the guy had a kid in his back seat. So he said to the guy, Ollie, I'm sorry, I cut you off. It was an accident, blah, blah, blah. There's a kid in your car. I don't want to fight. And it sort of just made the guy who was so angry, like, sort of wake up like, oh, my kid's in my car. Why am I so, and it just like all that anger was just gone. And it sort of just woke him up out of it. So, and there was, he shared another example of, he was like in a crowd at an event or something, and I guess they were leaving the event, and it was very crowded, and it was hard to get out of the doors, so people are pushing, and some guy sort of bumped into him and was like said something like, get out of the way or something, and the guy was just, who was pushed was like, well, he could have gotten angry and pushed back or been like, bah, cursed at him or whatever, but he just said, oh, it seems you're in a rush, go ahead. And that just deflected it too. The guy sort of looked at him like, because when you're coming at someone with anger, you're like almost expecting them to come back, like you want that, like rah, you know. So when the person comes back like, oh, go ahead, then you're sort of like, huh? And it just like takes that off, like that anger or whatever. So it can apply it to this too, I think. Like, you know, if you feel like there's something evil coming at you or bad, to bring your kindness and love to it, and that changes the whole situation. It changes them, because they're like, huh? Like it tweaks something in their brain, like, why is this person not reacting to my anger or evilness? They should be fighting back with me, and instead they're giving me love and kindness and letting me do what I'm doing. So I think that's powerful to look at it that way.
Definitely.
That's good.
I got a not so funny story about that. Yeah, so like when I was younger, I kind of was like almost tailing a person. I was right behind them at a stop sign, and they like stopped their brakes really fast, and like both of us were like kind of pissed off, and like went to get out of the car to like come at each other. Well, he got out of his car with a hammer and started walking towards me. I was like, I think I've had enough of that. Okay, I'm going back to my car now.
Yeah, but in that instance, he didn't really come out to deflect anything. He came out to me with the intent to do some real harm. You're the one who decided to retreat. But I think that's a different aspect of the situation. Whereas in Sandy's, you're intentionally changing your thought process, and you're changing your vibration and your energy you're putting out, and you're also coming from a place of compassion or empathy or something to that effect. Plus, at that point, it allows the door to be open to where you can come from you can both come from a different place, and maybe come to a starting agreement where you can start the conversation to maybe come to an agreement that will be in the best interest of all parties. So in that sense, sometimes doing something like that can get the door open to where you can sit down and have active dialogue to be able to talk about the issue and the problems or the things you'd like to see change and stuff like that. It's when we come at each other, so from our viewpoints and from our, this is the only way and it's got to be this way, that's change is hardly ever affected that way. It's when you can open the dialogue and come and start at a common understanding or starting point to work for that change. And I think that's some of what this chapter is talking about, is learning to get out of the negative, come back to the balanced and the positive, but in love and compassion, as Christina was saying. And I think that's the part of the real key there.
Oh, that's really good. That's really good. I like that a lot, because then you were talking about being able to communicate, and so then it says approach the universe. The universe, that's a bigger place than even the earth, right? So with the Tao, when I think of the world, and when a lot of us think of the world, we think, oh my gosh, there are so many troubles or quote unquote evils that rule the world. So that ability to communicate is like really important. And interestingly enough, you brought in Gandhi, and the examples I always think of are this path of nonviolence, which is like Gandhi, Martin Luther King, and Mother Teresa, and they're like the very few people who have like stood up for the idea of nonviolence. And it says, if only the ruler and the people would refrain from harming each other, all the benefits of life would accumulate in the kingdom. So it's like, yeah, that's really good.
I'd also like to get back to what we were talking about earlier with the resistance, actually, like getting credibility to things. I thought that was, really insightful. I'm not sure who was speaking on it originally, but there can be a difference between resisting and setting limits, I think, because when you resist, you sort of stop and become rigid, and now you're not going to take it anymore. You're not going to be flexible anymore. You sort of, if if we come at it from a different angle, and usually that's how that's how these things seem to be able to. The only way things seem to be able to work out is if we see other perspectives and come at it at a different angle. We come at it at a different angle, and where we're like, I see your opinions, I see your points, but like what Christina was says, what about this? Let's these are my limits. We can't, let's discuss this, but I'm against, certain things, and these are them. I'm not going to bring them out and throw them in your face, but this is where we need to know what the guidelines are. And, I think when they're talking about, it was verse 58, where he says at the very end, thus the master is content to serve as an example and not to impose his will. He is pointed, but does not pierce. He straightens, but does not disrupt. He illuminates, but does not dazzle. And so, in giving limits, you can illuminate, and without resistance, you can avoid, dazzling or over presenting your points, I think. So I just wanted to bring that out.
Yeah, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Karen. You have been out for a while. Go ahead.
I'm sorry for that. I realized as Sandy was talking that I had kind of slipped into a different spot. And I know sometimes that you think that I come at things from a different angle, and I hope that this will be really helpful. I don't know if anyone else is as evil as I am. I have, over the course of my life, realized that I had really become a crusty old broad. I just really saw the world from, life is hard and then you die, and, just a lot of things. And I had believed that I was a much more positive, outgoing, smiley, happy-faced person when I was younger, and it got further and farther away. I wasn't even sure if that was realistic. And something I've been doing in the last week is something I had never thought of before. I'd never considered before. This was a suggestion made to me that I was really happy about. And that is to go back into some of those stories that we tell ourselves, that, I think we probably all tell ourselves some of these raunchy things over and over and over and over and over. And the suggestion came with, doing this from your childhood, from the things that were just poured into your subconscious mind, without you being, a gatekeeper in any way. And I don't know how old I was when I finally absorbed that my mother had been in the hospital for 3 months after I was born. She may have told me, when I was younger, and it just is like didn't mean anything to me. But I think once I had children of my own, and I was into one of my old stories about how life is difficult, and what makes it so that we have a hard time taking care of ourselves and remaining good people. I thought, well, that's interesting. That sounds like abandonment. Here you are in somebody's womb for 9 months, and the wound disappears. Not only does the wound disappear, but everything attached. And so I had really thought, well, everything I read about abandonment was like it was one of the really terrible, terrible, terrible things that happened to people, and it, had a bad effect on relationships, and it had all this kind of stuff. So I had quite the story whooped up. And as I started to write about this whole thing, I realized there was, of course, no evil intent. There was nothing aimed my direction to harm me. And not only that, there was her mother, and when you think about it, there's got to be a lot of closeness in that. I mean, my grandmother died when I was 9 of cancer, which, I'm old enough that was like we'd never heard of it before. It wasn't like all over the news all the time, and she had kept it a secret. She didn't want anybody to know that she had it because my grandfather and the 2 siblings that remained that were unmarried were going to go to Denmark, in the fall, and she didn't want them to stop because she was ill. And so I don't have, unfortunately, a lot of memories of her, and I wasn't bright enough at age 9 or 8 or 7, to look at her and say, wow, she must have been a great mother, for 3 months. The kids, there were 4 kids in the family. My mother was the oldest, and the others, came home from school when I was there, and they thought I was the hottest thing in the planet. And so, I know I was treated really well. I mean, they told me all the time about how special I was, except for my uncle who dumped me on my head out of the bassinet and felt sorry the rest of his life. And I just think about how much I was surrounded by love, and, they took me to the hospital to see my mom. Not that I could probably see through that stupid glass. You can imagine in Cody, Wyoming, where the winter was cold and, they were standing on snow and but or not and I'd been in my mother's womb. I couldn't see her face. I didn't know what she looked like anyway. I mean, she could have been anyone in that hospital. But I realized how loving, really, the whole story was. And I thought about how many years I have read about abandonment and thought, oh, this must be the thing that's just made me such an evil person, and I can't get along with husbands, and I can't, whatever. So I just hope it's a little bit helpful to think about, sometimes that war is inside of us, and we can look at it, and we can write about it, and we can change it. And so that's what I have to share.
I appreciate you sharing that story, Karen, and that brings up a good point, is that we have to remember that, everybody else in the world has some kind of something going on inside themselves that causes them, or, that has created the beliefs that they have in their life, that has created the attitude that has made them who they are and why they do what they do. And when we can have compassion for that, and then, even if we don't agree with somebody, whatever thing it is that we're in disagreement about, is if we can have compassion for who that person is and where they come from, then we can also come towards them in a attitude of collaboration and compromise versus aggression and, squashing and that sort of thing. And I think that's really the key, in my opinion, of this particular verse, is just to be that, okay, yes, we have these things in the world that we don't agree with, that we call evil, but yet those things, whoever is instigating them is coming at that from a different point of view, who sees things completely different than what you do, and they probably see you as the evil, And so when you can allow for the other people to be who they are, and instead of trying to aggressively stop them from being who they are, is to then look at the problem or the situation and be like, okay, well, what can I do from my side, from my perspective, from my beliefs, to change the situation instead of just trying to destroy the other opposing party in there. In all of the different things that have happened in history, it's like if we had only looked at the other portion, the other side, rather than just trying to destroy that other thing, then, maybe we could have come out of it without the wars that we've had, without so much violence and pain and suffering for everyone, and that we could have come out of it with a solution that would have benefited everyone instead. So it all comes back to communication, and you can't communicate if you are butting heads, because neither one of you want to hear what the other person's side of the story is. Neither one of you want to be open to other possibilities, other solutions to the problem. So How to Win Friends and Influence People, go back to that book. Shoot, that's where it teaches you how to communicate to people. So okay, we're at the top of we've got 10 minutes left on our hour. Final thoughts. Everybody jump out and share a final thought. Oh, Marjorie, do you want to jump out?
I wanted to ask a question. How do we look at ISIS and what they're doing all over, how they're horribly hurting other people? How do I look at them? How do I make a difference? One is that I know that I need to keep myself in love, even though those horrors are going on. I wonder about this a lot because it hurts to see what they're doing.
I agree. There are so many things that that are going on in the world that we can disagree with, and I think that the key is not to do what I feel like the government is just going over there and trying to force people to stop doing whatever they're doing. And I don't think that that's necessarily the answer, but it's what can I do personally to make a difference? How can I help make a change in the world to make a positive difference? What was that?
Exactly.
Well, I was going to also say, once again, it goes back to part of all what we've said is it's a group over there. It's a certain group that has a certain ideological thoughts and things like that. So it's not everybody in that area is part of ISIS. Not everybody thinks that way. So we got to remember that, this is one group, and it might be harder to open dialogue with them or get them to come to the table for dialogue. So yes, you might have to use some alternate means, but we ourselves can still come from love and compassion towards those that don't deserve that, while still I still believe we need to be respectful and protective of our interests too, but we can still go at it from a more compromising place and way of trying to, get things to the table so we can work on something. But sometimes you can't, and in some cases the other side has to be willing to come to that place too. We have to get them at least to be open to that. So sometimes all you can do is just come from love and keep coming from love, or from that balanced space to keep working towards that. It might not be overnight. It might take a lot of years too.
Sorry, go ahead, Christina.
I think it's also important to recognize that here's the thing. Right now, I can't say right now, but like as if it's the only time it's ever happened, but we're operating off of such a spirit of fear right now, and that's being driven by so many different mediums right now. But I think it's important to recognize that the people that are over there in that country, most of which don't agree with ISIS, most of them are feared, and they are being most abused by ISIS than we are. And so how I think, one of the ways that I can contribute to changing that is not see someone with a hijab and automatically think, oh my gosh, that's danger. Oh my gosh, they're trying to kill me. Oh my gosh, they got this secret sale going on. Like, that's ridiculous. It's also because then that fear begins to perpetuate your every thought, and every intention and motivation becomes justified by your fear, by my fear, by everybody's fear, right? So I think one way to overcome that is let's not get so lost in all the hyperbolic discussion. Because if we take a step back, there are so many things that we do as Americans that is equally just as bad. We're raining down, bombs and drones and stuff that are killing innocent women and children and men over there. And it's not, and I understand we've got to protect our own, but I think that we have to take a step back and be reasonable about some things. There are atrocities in our own country that we do to our own people. There's no sense there's no sense in all the homelessness that we have. But then, particular people in the government make decisions, and then only the rich people or the very wealthy people are getting advantages. That's just as much as an atrocity. It's in a different way. Maybe it's not somebody busted into someone's home with a gun or throwing a grenade, but my gosh, it's putting a lot of children out on the street. It's sending a lot of kids to school with no food. So I think we have to take a step back and get off of our moral high horse too, and I think that'll help too.
Yeah, that's a good point, Christina. And I think that what it kind of boils down to is that, when we see these, what we consider atrocities and evils in the world, is instead of being mad at the people that we think are perpetuating the problem, is to become part of the solution and take the steps that we know that we can take that can help the situation. So for instance, if you feel driven and compassionate about the situation with ISIS and all of that, it's like, instead of trying to squash down ISIS, it's what can you do to help the people who are being oppressed by that? Can you support some organizations that are over there working to help those people escape from it? And not support the side of it that is just over there bombing. It's like, that doesn't solve anything. But yet, if I can, and then the same thing here in the U.S. When we see homelessness and we have these issues with kids going to school without food, and it may seem like, okay, well, if we're focused on our issue here, then we don't care about out over there on the other side of the world. But that's not true, because every little thing that we can do to make our world a better place, even in our little tiny community, even if it's only providing, a sack lunch to the person who is standing on the side of the road asking for money, that's one thing that we can do, coming from a place of love and coming from a place of, okay, yes, we realize there's these things going on in the world. We have to just allow whatever to happen. But the things that I'm going to do to make a difference are this, 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 and this. And that's how I'm going to start from here in my place with what I have available to me, and work forward for a better future overall.
Can I say my last little real quick? Listen, I feel like in general, like in all of the things, if we step back out of this emotional, like, fear space, like, we can use a little reason and common sense too. I mean, for example, the notion that a wall for, billions of dollars that could be feeding homeless people, and it could be helping with our healthcare system and stuff, is going to solve drug abuse, is ridiculous. But that's the story that's being told. And because we're all up in this emotional place that we fear Mexicans, and we fear that they're going to come over here and kill everybody, and they're bringing drugs over here, we're not thinking about reason. I live in Appalachia. I live in the heart of it. And I can tell you right now, these people are not overdosing because drugs are coming from Mexico. They're overdosing because they can go to the pharmacy, where the pharmaceutical companies have passed all the lobby for these laws and stuff that allows them to send these opioids and people to be getting them without any red flags coming up. That's why they're dying. It's a common sense thing that we can't see when we're coming from fear, right? So I'm like, that's one of my passionate places. Like, how can I calmly appeal to somebody's reason and common sense rather than all these stereotypes and fear? Because if I go off of my experience in life, I shouldn't trust a white man for anything, because I've experienced negativity and hurt and pain from white men, and I've seen them do it to my family and friends. But I can't say that one experience in my life is the whole definition of life. We got to get out of that space of fear.
Yeah, we definitely allow our past experiences to filter and color our personal views on whatever is coming our way. And it's hard to get out of that emotional state. And it's also hard to not feel the urgency of, we need to get this solved now, and allow that to come out and keep you from actually articulating what it is that you really want done. Those are all very difficult things. I think that's, something that it's definitely something I'm working on to keep myself centered, keep myself balanced, even in the midst of, like battle with your, whatever you're trying to change in the world. I really appreciate what Karen was saying earlier about, in her story, and how she was able to dig in and reflect on her past, and change and actually reframe a memory of abandonment into the loving memories that she was able to give it a whole nother color of existence in her world, because she focused on the loving part of it. If we and it kind of goes back to our subconscious working to try to get us the things that we're focused on, or focusing on the things that we want. And if we set our mind out there to look at all the negative, then it will find negative, and it will find the things that will hurt us. If we, it's not ignoring them to not look for them. It's not ignoring them to try to focus on the good parts. You got to, be in it and not of it is a difficult thing. But how much of us actually put in the work to get that done for our day, and setting our intentions in the morning as to how we're going to react, and how we're going to be effective in the world during the day, rather than letting it just blindside us out of the, while we're going through our daily routine, and something happens and we're like, whoa, and it just sets us off. If we set our intentions in the morning as to how we're going to, handle these things, I think it can help. And, wearing a smile. I love that story about Sandy, and not getting a ticket for, and, just because she had, a great attitude, and, wore a smile, and allowed the other person to also let down their guard as well. So, gosh, all these are such great ideas and principles. It's great to be here. I love you guys, and I wish you all the best, and hope you have a great weekend. Thanks for coming out. I get so much from being here. Wow.
Thank you, everyone. Also, this is exactly what I was looking for.
Wonderful, wonderful, Marjorie. It's so great to have you on this morning, and we look forward to having you back again in the future, and hearing your insights as you have them. Thank you.
Is this every week?
Yep, we
do
do
this
every week.
Oh, good. Okay.
Every Saturday morning.
Thank you. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Awesome.
Yeah.
Any final words for anybody else before we wrap up?
I was just going to say it was great to be back on this week. Last week I didn't make it because of some stuff going on. But I'm so glad I'm back and being here as much as I can. And because I've so missed all of you. And so looking forward to more.
I like these little affirmations in here. I'll share a couple. I choose not to have any thoughts of harm directed to anyone by me. I am a being of light and love, and therefore the only thoughts that can emerge from me are in harmony with the great loving Tao. And I deserve and anticipate receiving only divine love. This is what I attract. I send loving, kind thoughts to all and trust that this love will help them see the folly of their hatred. Yay. That's it. Great discussion. I have to hop off as soon as we're done, so it's great to see you.
What page was that on?
Yes, what page?
They're sort of spread out throughout. 287 is where it starts on the bottom, and then on 289 there's a couple. They're all in italics, the affirmations.
Okay. Okay. Wow, this is wonderful.
Great, Sandy. Thanks for that.
Awesome, guys. All right, so we'll wrap up for today. Thank you all for joining us. It was good seeing you all again this week, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. So for those of you who are watching, please like this video on YouTube, share it with anybody you think would help, or it would help. And if you'd like to join us, you can always find us every week, Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern. If you go to the link, zoom.saturdaymorningmastermind.com, that gives you instructions for joining our discussion either via video or phone conference call. And again, Jason's holding up the book we're studying, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao. And next week we'll be talking about verse 61 of the Tao Te Ching. So with that, guys, have a great, awesome, and amazing weekend, and we'll see you next week on the Saturday Morning Mastermind. Bye for now.